Real challenge for medicine should be to extend life, but instead it is wrestling with artificially created problems. Chapter 11. The Sole Cause of Wars. The 11th Lesson about the World. 1. Do you know what the French did in the First World War? Do you know what the Germans did in World War II? Do you know what the Americans did in Vietnam? Do you know what the Soviets did in Afghanistan? Do you know what the Iraqis did in Kuwait? I'll tell you. Absolutely nothing. A country is not a closed system, nor is a continent. This planet is a closed system. Therefore, everything on this planet is global, which means that everything belongs to everyone. Whatever happens in one country belongs to all countries. Nothing is a private matter. Since Chernobyl, this hardly needs explaining. In fact, there are no nations, only people. There are no countries. There is only this planet. That is the basic situation. But you can't incite much violence on such a basic position. You can't create enough violence to bind the attention, thoughts, emotions, and actions of billions of people. The Supreme Caste had to make people believe that those living in other geographical areas were alien and dangerous, or at least suspicious. It is now possible to create international crime, to wage war, and to maintain the threat of war. 2. Generalization, ignoring differences, is one of the most basic, powerful, and vicious tools of manipulation. In fact, the media generalize everything. Generalization, like a disease, is so widespread and so effective that if you show on TV that there have been 3 outbreaks in 3 different countries, the reaction is, there is a pandemic. 3 out of 6 billion people have been infected, and it's considered a pandemic. Violence cannot spread unless it is based on generalization. It is absolutely impossible to start a war if it is not based on a generalization. The question is, what did the Germans do in World War II? What did the Americans do in Vietnam? And what did the Iraqis do in Kuwait? The only correct answer is nothing at all. Neither the Germans nor the Americans nor the Iraqis did anything. They are nations, and nations cannot act. History books say that the Germans attacked France in the Second World War. Absolutely impossible. It is a lie. It did not happen. Nations do not act. A nation is an abstract concept that denotes a community, nothing more. An entire population cannot be condemned and held responsible for the sins of specific individuals. Such collective responsibility always results in the real perpetrators getting away with their crimes, while many innocent people are punished. At the behest of a few people, and according to the plans of a few people, some born in Germany, some born in Austria, some in other countries, an army flying a German flag, made up largely of people born in Germany, attacked people living in France. It's true, it happened. But not all Germans agreed with this action. Can you imagine how many threats it took for the soldiers of the armies of the Second World War to kill anonymous people who were strangers to them? Do you have any idea how horribly and brutally people and their families, conscripted into the armies, had to be threatened and disciplined to carry out senseless orders? According to contemporary records, more than 50% of the soldiers in the German army refused to kill even under these threats. Real re-education camps and programs had to be developed by the leadership to persuade their soldiers to commit deadly crimes on command. That is how much they disagreed with the war. If we condemn nations, we will have 2 results. 1. The real culprits will go free. That is absolutely certain. 2. We will hate whole nations. That is, we will generalize, which is nothing but warmongering, inflammatory propaganda. Everything is done by people. People do both the good and the bad, and if we are not able to make a distinction between people, and if we are not able to identify the real source of the danger, then there is nothing we can do about it. The Supreme Caste is aware of this, so they are actually making people dumber and dumber by making loud generalizations in the media. 3. The Supreme Caste beats generalizations into people so that they see everything as a coherent, smooth mass, and they go mad. Everything is the same. Everyone is the same. Either nobody has done anything, or everybody has done something. To start a war, you need an incredible amount of generalization. The precondition for war is that the armed forces of at least 2 countries attack each other in an organized way and start killing each other. How do you get someone to go to another country and kill the people who live there? By deception. Deception to the point of hallucination. 8 people born in Iran go to China and commit a crime. If there were no generalization, what would happen? These 8 people would be sought, arrested, and punished, but not once would it be mentioned where they were born. But if we generalize, then the crime of the 8 Iranian-born people in China is an Iranian declaration of war against China, as a result of which the Chinese army goes to Iran and starts killing people there. Without generalization, there can be no war. No conflict between countries, peoples, religions, or other communities. Notice that when a few white people born in England commit a crime in the United States, the possibility of war is not even mentioned. Whereas, when a few people born in Syria commit a crime in the United States, the possibility of war with Syria is immediately mentioned. The reason is that the Supreme Caste wants to stir up war tensions between America and Syria, but not between America and Britain. In both cases, the same thing happened, but in one case, it was not generalized. In the other, it was. 4. America has no response. Russia has no plans. Iraq does not threaten other countries, and so on. Countries are abstract concepts, merely geographical and legal terms. A country or a nation thinks nothing, feels nothing, does nothing, plans nothing, makes no decisions, and goes nowhere. Only human beings are capable of such things. Individual human beings who have names, faces, homes, thoughts, worldviews, and lives. Suppose 20 people, born in Australia and living in the Sahara, travel to England and assassinate the royal family, and England declares war on Australia and the Sahara. This makes as much sense as a mountaineer falling down a mountain and then some people coming up and smashing the mountain in revenge. It's all pure manipulation. The Supreme Caste decides to start a war, throws in a lie, a thought idol, supplies it with false arguments, ideologies, and backs it all up with authority figures, and the people believe it. And the game of what is known in professional circles as organized slaughter can begin. 5. If you look at any 2 things, you will find many differences between them. 2 leaves, 2 apples, 2 books, 2 pencils, 2 of anything. If someone told you that you were exactly like one of your friends, you would know that they were not normal, because you would see thousands of differences between you and your friend, and that's just 2 people. Can you imagine what it must be like to see millions of people as exactly alike? Can you imagine how crazy you must be to do that? Can you imagine how much power authority figures have? Warmongering propaganda does nothing more than generalize and claim that all people belonging to a particular nation agree on everything to the maximum. This propaganda works, and what it claims is utter nonsense. Wars are fought to distract people from other things. Wars have no more fundamental reason than that. A war breaks out because the supreme caste orders it. The first step is that propaganda comes in and does nothing but generalize. You can study any war. All the war propaganda, all the agitation propaganda was just generalization. Then, with some organization, enough weapons and anger are gathered in a small place, and then one or both armies, or part of an army, are launched. An armed conflict is created, which means that people die. From that moment on, a new factor comes into play: personal loss. The war becomes a personal matter for the population, and so it takes on a life of its own. Somewhere, everything, or almost everything, is trade. You give something, and you get something in return. In war, you give your honor, your mind, your health, and your life. And what do you get in return? Words, and empty words at that. Patriot, hero, man, a real man. He gives away everything he has and gets a few words in return, a few titles that, if they ever meant anything, certainly didn't mean a puppet without a will, which goes where it's told, commits whatever crime it's told to do, and then dies just because it's told to. A war is fought as long as the supreme caste wants it, and ends when the supreme caste stops it. Whatever war we take, it ended because the supreme caste said it was over. Something was presented on the surface and used as an excuse. Then the orders were given, and the fight was over. That's the end of war. Get a map of the world and look at it, and forget about countries and borders. When you do that, you will see much more clearly. It is absolutely irrelevant where in the world a particular crime was committed, in which part of the world those who committed it were born, lived, and planned what they did. Forget countries and forget nations, for there are none. The aliens don't live on Earth. Chapter 12. A Dirty World. The 12th lesson about the world. 1. You may remember the headlines that broke the sensational news that the United States of America and its allies had attacked Iraq in order to disarm it of its weapons of mass destruction, despite the protests of the UN and international public opinion. And you will also remember the headlines that told the world that nothing had been found. What happened in Iraq? One thing is certain: it is not what they say. This latest war in Iraq, the second in number, has nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction or oil. It is about something else. Think about it. How much was at stake in finding the weapons of mass destruction that started this whole war? Because if they had found them, the opponents would have forgotten all the grievances, all the disagreements. They would have forgiven the violation of UN resolutions, the disregard of public opinion, everything. If they had found them, it would have saved the reputation of the President of the United States, the reputation of American politics, the intelligence service, and the military, and the reputation of the American people. Yet, they found nothing. What could have been so important that it was worth even that sacrifice? The question is not what it seems to be. It's not why they found nothing, but if the stakes were so high, why didn't they lie about having found it? It would have been easy. It would not have been the first lie in politics. And who could have checked? But let's play with the idea and suppose that a weapon of mass destruction had been found in Iraq. What do you think the scenario would have been in this case? Say, Sergeant Joe finds something strange in an Iraqi village. What does he do? Notify his superior officer? I'm sure he would. And his superior? His superior officer notifies his superior officer, right? And what else do you do? Notify the media? Really? He commandeers 5 passenger planes, 1 for the officers, 1 for the experts, 1 for the soldiers securing the scene, 1 for the media people, 1 for the onlookers, and then these 1,500 people move out to the scene where Sergeant Joe has found something strange. The object is surrounded by the experts, the officers, the media people, the onlookers, the soldiers. All at once they examine it, and they conclude that the object is in fact a hydrogen bomb. Within a minute, the news is all over the world. Well, is that what would have happened? Was that the scenario? Hardly. The moment Sergeant Joe informs his superior, the case is classified as top secret. That means from then on, no one can talk about it, not even among friends. A few experts travel to the scene in utmost secrecy and examine the object. If the object is a weapon of mass destruction, it is hidden and removed from the country, and they do all this to the complete exclusion of journalists, reporters, photographers, terrorists, onlookers, and anyone else who was not part of the team carrying out the operation. This is what would have happened if any dangerous weapons had been found in Iraq. There would have been no live TV coverage. No outsider would have been allowed near the object. How big is a hydrogen bomb? Some are the size of a suitcase. How big is an ampule containing a pathogen capable of killing millions of people? Some are the size of a small mobile phone. And how big is Iraq? Get it? The whole thing is full of contradictions from start to finish. No one could have gained access to the weapon, and no one could have checked to see if there was no weapon, but they were lying about there being one. Just as in the reverse case, it would have been enough to show a crate and say, nuclear bomb. A photo would have been enough. All it would have taken was an official statement. All that would have been enough, whether there was a weapon or not. And yet, there was no crate, no photo, and no statement. They allegedly didn't even find the means of making weapons of mass destruction. Yet chemical and biological weapons can be produced with ordinary household tools, provided one has the know-how and the raw materials. 2. The point of all this is not that nothing was found in Iraq, although that is very hard to imagine. The point is the ideology and the thought idol that the supreme caste has, using its authority figures, sold to the people. America and its allies, in short, America, initiated a war against a country on false pretenses. That is the news. That is the ideology. And that is the point. America. The Americans. It's a generalization. This is all a well-planned and precisely executed, warmongering, inflammatory propaganda against the United States of America. What is all this for? It is the preparatory stage. We are witnessing the ideological groundwork for a future event. What this future event is, and when it will take place, is anyone's guess. But 2 things are certain. One is the nature of the event, and the other is the location. It will happen in America, and the key player will be some kind of weapon of mass destruction. The war in Iraq is nothing other than a pretext for selling an ideology, and that ideology is intended to create very negative public sentiment against the United States of America and against the American people. This is so that when it happens, it will be credible. Today there are no longer opposing military blocs. The reason why is because the idea of having them has not lived up to expectations. A better idea was needed, and now there is one. It was my job to develop the lies that would support the Supreme Caste's thought idol that the United States deserves to be destroyed, except that there is no conventional way to wage war against America because of its geography and technical capabilities. That is why the argument, the ideology I developed, is the medium for a new kind of war. This new kind of war will bring hell on earth. If war is everywhere, if the threat is everywhere and affects everyone, then everything is permitted as a defense. Is it not? The Supreme Caste has devised a new kind of world war, one that requires far less investment than the previous wars, yet brings in far more revenue than all previous wars combined. Sometimes 1 or 2 people die here, 100 die there, civilians of course, and in all sorts of places. The point is that there should be no logic to it, because if there is none, it is unpredictable. Fear is perpetuated, and a new industry blossoms that generates more revenue than anything that has ever existed before, and is also far more nefarious than anything that has ever existed before. That industry is the war on terror. Not terrorism itself, but rather the war against terrorism. This is the cause and background of the war in Iraq. It has nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction or oil. It has to do with the vilification of the United States of America and nothing else. A war is being prepared against America, and this is the preparatory stage. By the way, Iraq is full of weapons of mass destruction. This I happen to know for sure. Chapter 13. The Role of Crime. The 13th lesson about the world. 1. Crime is increasingly seen as something normal, and criminals are seen as normal people. Crime has become a simple profession. There are people who teach geography in a high school. There are people who drive taxis. There are people who fly airplanes. There are people who are detectives. There are people who are painters. There are people who deliver mail. And there are people who rape women and children, steal cars, break into flats and houses, rob banks, murder people, and so on. The long-standing effort of the Supreme Caste to make crime presentable has never been more successful than today in the age of materialism. The once sharp line between society and the underworld is beginning to blur. The media turns psychopathic criminals into folk heroes. Talented and skilled, as well as completely amateur directors, writers, actors, and musicians promote the criminal lifestyle. The world is flooded with recruitment films, recruitment books, recruitment albums, all with a single message: people, become criminals. 2. The proponents of materialism claim that humans are fundamentally evil, that they are fundamentally bloodthirsty beasts, that humans are inherently predatory toward one another, that evil is in our blood, and that as a species, we are still mere children. We are not mature enough to be entrusted with nature because we exploit it. We destroy the planet. We destroy the fauna, the flora. We kill each other. We have a deep instinct for territorialism, the instinct to kill. We have crime and warfare, and it is all genetically encoded into us. At least that's what the authority figures say. But let's examine this ideology without any sense of religious piety. Humans are fundamentally evil. That's too general. Let's be a bit more specific. Who is evil? Is everyone bad? Are humans inherently predatory toward one another? Most people never commit crimes. Most people never take what is not theirs. They don't steal from other people's lockers, drawers, bags, or pockets. They don't steal other people's cars. They don't embezzle a single penny. They don't break into apartments, houses, factories, warehouses, beat up people, rape children or women, and let's add to that, men either. They kidnap no one, murder no one, dump no radioactive waste in the sea in rusty steel drums, clear no forests, nor start any wars. So who is the villain? Who is it that actually makes these universal accusations? Is it you? Or your neighbor? Your friend? To whom do these accusations apply? It is only a handful of people, in fact very few, only a small percentage of the human race, yet the media has created a mirage around them, as if they were the majority. There are people who fight for others all day long, the real doctors, paramedics, virologists, bacteriologists, disaster relief workers, investigators, and others. And there are people who, though not as spectacularly, are there to maintain their posts and keep the world running. Well, what about them? What do they do to mess it up? Are they killing too? Are they stealing, robbing, cheating, embezzling? Do they rape others, burn forests, start wars? Yes? When? Where? How? I am well aware that the authority figures claim that humans are fundamentally evil, vile beasts, because I have suggested that they claim that. But if you ignore the authority figures, you will see that what they chant is simply baseless. 3. Of course, it would be short-sighted to claim that those who are imprisoned are certainly criminals, and those who are not are certainly good people. Nor can I responsibly state that the penal codes punish all crimes, or that the worst crimes are punished, because that would not be true. There is no doubt that all roads are unnecessarily and arbitrarily made more difficult. In fact, if one wants to achieve something, one encounters dozens or hundreds or thousands of arbitrary obstacles. Arbitrary obstacles, that is, obstacles that people have created in order to make roads more difficult or even impassable. This phenomenon leads people toward crime. The fact is that life is hard, and that it is hard because it is made that way. But the difficulty of staying on the right path is completely irrelevant to the outcome. The preachers of materialism have long since declared that crime cannot be defeated. But on what basis did they declare this, that it has not yet been conquered? No one has ever been to Pluto, but it is still possible, is it not? So what knowledge is the basis for the statement that nothing can be done about crime? Edison carried out thousands of experiments before he found out how to make an electric light bulb. How many methods have been tried to stop crime, and in which way? How did they manage to try every conceivable method in a meaningful way in just a few decades? Obviously, they haven't. What would you need to see in a microscope or a test tube? Or what test would you need to perform to see that crime cannot be stopped? And who would be the one to work to eliminate crime? Which organization? Which ministry? Do you know of any plan, event, or movement in the history of humanity that has targeted the elimination of crime? Can you think of any? The truth is that no plan to eliminate crime has ever been made, and no action has ever been taken to eliminate crime. The invincibility of crime is a myth. It is just a lie, told with enormous authority and backed up by nothing. 4. Crime is a weight around our necks. It is artificially created and artificially maintained. It is based on generalization, that everyone is guilty. Everyone is a criminal. It is a big lie. Crime is a tool for the supreme caste. It is used to perform 3 functions. 1. To physically control people. 2. to make people disappear by invoking it. And 3. To use it to impose more and ever more severe restrictions. Crime is therefore a means, a pretext. Law enforcement is a parody. Criminology is about as far from being a science as pedagogy. The so-called law enforcement system is about as effective as the education system. Its operation is a sham. Its successes are incredibly rare. Its successes are due in no small part to the police officers, investigators, and technicians who, despite the terrible pressures they are artificially subjected to, despite the rules that make police work almost completely inoperable, and despite the incredible inadequacy of their tools, do their jobs by virtue of their personal skills and commitment. True criminology is one of the secret sciences. It is at a very early stage, both in its philosophical background and in its methodology and technical tools. All major discoveries in this field have been buried. A science that deals with investigation, with the recognition and retrieval of clues, with the identification and search for sources, causes, and perpetrators, is a life-threatening business for a power that operates in the shadows. Police work may bring temporary successes, but in the long term, it is completely hopeless. The police have no tools to fight crime. Have you ever been in a trial where everyone knew that the criminal had committed the crime? They themselves did not deny it, and yet the charges were dropped because of some procedural error. Do you know what a procedural error is? For example, if a detective searches a garbage can without a proper warrant. A so-called procedural error is a loophole built into the system. Its function is to allow the cast to use some pretext to get people out of jail, who they need for some reason. Punishment has never brought reprieve. If all criminals were dissected alive from now on, there would still be criminals. A person doesn't commit a crime because they will not be dissected. If every thief had their arm cut off from now on, it would not lead to an end to theft, because a person does not steal because they have an arm. They do not rob because they are not in prison. They do not kill because they have not been executed. The punishment has nothing to do with the cause of the crime. It is nowhere near the cause, and it has never worked. Chapter 14. Wave of Terror. The 14th lesson about the world. 1. A series of terrorist attacks struck London. 4 suicide bombers, all British citizens of Arab descent, carried out the attacks. Officials assume that all of them died in the bombings, although so far only one of their bodies has been identified. Some sources put the death toll at 50, while others put the number of victims at less, and still others at more. According to one expert, there are at least 3,000 potential terrorists still waiting to be mobilized in Britain. All this happened in the summer of 2005. Do you remember these media reports? Terrorism is a very interesting subject and very worthy of serious study, because according to the objectives of the Supreme Caste, this is the future. The very first problem with terrorism is the definition. What is terrorism? Nowadays, activities with the word terrorism in their title have a strong advantage over other things, by which I mean various preferential rights and funds. It has become fashionable, even a business interest, to associate as many things as possible with terrorism in some way. Many items, such as gas masks, that in most countries nobody wants, have suddenly become trendy articles at certain times when they are associated with the advertising slogan, "Protection against terrorism." People who were previously regarded with total indifference are now in the spotlight, proclaiming themselves terrorism experts. An increasing share of various government and corporate budgets is being devoted to defense. If a new product or service is advertised as a means of fighting terrorism, sales are unlikely to be a problem. In summary, entire industries have now been built on the war on terror, which thrive on the hysteria created by the media around the subject. The Supreme Caste has created a new industry around terrorism, from which a large and increasing number of people are making a living. It has created a new business on which people have built their lives, and these people will defend their own interests. They will fight with all the means at their disposal against the proper definition of the words terrorism and terrorist, and against the spread of correct definitions, for fear of being put out of business. This is how the Supreme Caste creates volunteers who are prepared to kill to protect their supposed interests, but in reality, they are only protecting the interests of the caste. It is because of this phenomenon, and this phenomenon alone, that the definition of the words terrorism and terrorist has become so difficult. These two words do not have concrete, established, and officially sanctioned definitions. In fact, it is a fairly simple task to define the words. If we study a few terrorist attacks in search of common denominators, what we are looking for jumps out with remarkable speed. This is the first thing that comes to mind, for it is this that triggers our indignation. Prepared, armed individuals slaughtering unprepared, unarmed individuals. This is the common denominator in all terrorist attacks. Terrorism is therefore an organized armed struggle against a civilian population. Its sole purpose is to intimidate the population. Its essence is unpredictability and senselessness, because if something can happen anywhere, it is as if it cannot be defended against. This is terrorism. It has nothing to do with the fight for freedom. 2. Having defined the meaning of the word terrorism, another question that arises is, can we fight terrorists? And if so, how? First of all, violent criminals are not dangerous, despite the fact that they have a great deal of experience in brutalizing people. Violent criminals are known for their lack of imagination, and therefore their inability to imagine a life that is not spent in prison for most of it. Violent criminals arm themselves and attack unarmed people, preferably in large numbers. The real monsters are not like that. The real monsters have received high-level military training and have spent years in live action in hot terrain where a person could be killed at any moment by a stray bullet or torn to shreds by an exploding charge. Monsters are born in wars and become highly skilled at fighting life and death battles with trained and armed soldiers. The real monsters do not prey on unarmed humans. They fight armed soldiers and do so for years in almost constant mortal danger. When the location of a terrorist or a terrorist group is pinpointed, a few monsters go out to the site. There, it is not usually the violent criminals who kill all the monsters. That's not what happens. In reality, the real monsters walk all over these criminals as if they were nothing. The SWAT team doesn't have a history of loss of life in confrontations with terrorists. When they do slip up, it's always because of their own mistakes, not because of the danger of the terrorists. It would seem, therefore, that the difficulty lies in how to find terrorists who live in hiding. One gets the impression from television news reports that they are either impossible or almost impossible to find. But of course, this is not true either. 3. A lonely psychopath boards a bus with a homemade bomb in their bag. The bus leaves. The bomb explodes. 15 people are killed. This kind of thing is very difficult to prevent. But this is not terrorism. Not because terrorism is organized. Terrorism is a constant threat and a constant harassment, not a one-off incident. That would be pointless. A terrorist organization is a corporation that produces and sells fear. A large organization with funds, a network of supporters, camps, buildings, vehicles, equipment, hundreds or thousands of people, recruiting people, training people, buying and acquiring information, Traveling organizers and operatives all around the world preparing and carrying out attacks contrary to media legend cannot exist and operate invisibly. There have been cases where foreign teams have been allowed into the training facilities of a terrorist organization. In any given geographical area, pretty much everyone knows some terrorists. Many Irish people who are not members or sympathizers of the IRA know IRA members. Contrary to the media myth, terrorist organizations are far from invisible. Large terrorist organizations therefore cannot hide. Neither can small ones. Smaller organizations either join a larger one or they are destroyed. They die because they are not viable without support or backing, or because their activities interfere with business, so they are caught and wiped out. A small group is only viable if it becomes a subcontractor under the protective wing of a larger organization, so even they are not invisible. And yet the monsters don't go. There are huge international political interests behind terrorism. That is why the monsters don't go. A few renegade terrorists or small groups interfering in the process can become real targets. A few well-trained and properly equipped commandos could wipe out any large terrorist organization, but they are not deployed against them. Terrorism is an invincible boogeyman. One sick animal can terrorize the whole world. Never, nowhere, not for a single moment, can anyone be safe from the threat of terrorism. Organizations are impossible to find and stop. This is the myth. None of it is true. 4. The Supreme Caste deploys the entire mass media network to create terror around the world. And then, the authority figures step forward and claim that there is only one solution left. They say there is a cure for terrorism, but it is very bitter. We must give up democracy, regrettably, for our security. In many countries, laws have already been introduced that are unacceptable in a democracy, yet people accept them because they are intimidated. Not by terrorists, by their mythology. What was the purpose of the London bombings? Just the usual. It was just another nail driven into the lid of democracy's coffin. Chapter 15. Driven Mad. The 15th lesson about the world. 1. It is true that the ideologies that surround the essential lie and the thought idols are extremely complex, obscure, multifaceted, and above all, professional. It is also true that the Supreme Caste deploys entire armies of authority figures to convince people that they see things incorrectly, think incorrectly, and know incorrectly. This is all fact. However, there is something here that is probably bothering you. How is this whole system able to work? It is not logical that it should. It's completely illogical for someone to give up their own ideas, forget their personal certainties, and dismiss their own experiences simply because someone else told them to. And yet this is what happens. And it has happened throughout history. How? How is this possible? Are people that crazy? Are they mentally deficient? Are they so easily confused and stripped of their confidence and even their sanity? You see something, and then someone comes along who has 12 doctorates and says, "No, you didn't see it. You were hallucinating." And you think, maybe I didn't see it. Why is that? How is that possible? How can one person have this much power over another? The phenomenon where someone knows something, then another person comes along and says they don't know it, and they then believe they don't know it, is probably the most shocking thing anyone could ever encounter. Extraterrestrials, demons, werewolves, magic, teleportation, faster than light travel, and the like are simply nothing compared to the way an authority figure can destroy the knowledge and confidence of another human being with just a few words. That this is possible is not normal. 2. Authority is the essence of power. But why do authority figures have this effect? Why can it work? Authority figures determine people's destinies and the destiny of the entire human race. The authority-centric mindset does not work in every single case. Certain authority figures have no effect on you. Other authority figures cannot and would not convince you, while still other authority figures have already convinced you. So we can see that authority works because of something that is in us. The authority mindset can work because of a flaw within us. That flaw is a low level of awareness. Consequently, oppression depends on and is based on the mental state of the individual. Oppression is possible only and exclusively because people's level of awareness allows them to be susceptible to believing lies. Without this, the supreme caste would have no power. It follows that whether we are talking about oppression or about setting people free, we are ultimately talking about the human soul. Since the key to power is the poor mental state of humanity, the key to power is to prevent the science of the soul from developing. For if that happens, if there is a working, practical science that can bring people to a better state of mind, the power of the supreme caste will disintegrate. The power of the supreme caste is based on ignorance. Knowledge destroys that power. 3. The supreme caste will, therefore, destroy all real knowledge of the human soul, mind, reasoning, memory, or anything of the kind, and will elevate, support, and defend all systems, religions, philosophies, and pseudosciences that spread and inculcate lies in people about themselves. Now, what are the two systems that are officially regarded as science, and which are officially the supreme, even exclusive authorities on the human soul, called? One is psychology, the other is psychiatry. These two are the most powerful establishments of authority on the human mind. These two pseudosciences are replacing the real, truly functioning science of the soul in society. In short, 1. The supreme caste invents lies to deceive people and thus rule over them. 2. The supreme caste wraps these lies in ideologies, that is, systems of arguments, so that it is not easy to recognize that the lie is a lie. 3. Ideologies are introduced into society by authority figures. 4. Authority figures overwhelm people, thereby making them accept the lies. 5. Authority centrism works only because of people's low level of awareness. 6. The power of the supreme caste exists only because of the poor mental condition of the people. 7. The existence of the supreme caste fundamentally depends on keeping humanity in a poor mental state. 8. The supreme caste will therefore prevent the spread of truths about the human condition in every way possible. If they were to spread, people would become more aware, and the power of the caste would be nullified. 9. The supreme caste prevents the development of a working science of humanity by lying that this science already exists. 10. The supreme caste has declared psychology and psychiatry to be the science of the human spirit, soul, consciousness, and mind, and has given them political, economic, and medical hegemony in these fields. 11. The power of the supreme caste thus depends on the authority of psychology and psychiatry. The supreme caste exists and can play its little games with us only as long as it is able to conceal every truth about humanity, its capacities, its potentialities, and its powers. Psychiatry and psychology are a collection of lies about the human being. Their function in society is to convince people that there is no upward path, that so-called normality is the highest attainable level of existence, and to discredit, exclude, and destroy any method, knowledge, or technique that would genuinely improve the human condition. 4. There is no officially recognized discipline that deals with God or the soul, nor is there one that has as its mission to find out whether there is a God, whether man has a soul, whether there are past lives, whether there are higher faculties that are not bound to the body, whether there is a purpose to life, and whether there is good and evil. None of the officially accepted sciences or disciplines deal with these issues, and all other issues are completely irrelevant in comparison. There has never been a formal series of scientific experiments to find out what the nature of being human is. It is the most taboo subject in the world. No other area is more fiercely protected by the supreme caste than this. 5. The word psychology dates to the 1500s. It means the science of the soul. Originally a branch of philosophy, it took the name science of the soul because it sought to use the methods of science rather than the methods of philosophy to understand the soul. It did so initially, and as early as the second half of the 1700s, it declared that the existence of the soul, a reality completely independent of the material world, had been scientifically verified. For a very long time, psychology was not materialistic. For centuries, it proclaimed the existence of the soul and that the existence of the human soul could be scientifically proven. The word psychiatry means healing of the soul. Psychiatry was born out of necessity. At the end of the 18th century, a new profession was created to care for and cure the insane who were locked up in insane asylums. It should be noted that insane asylums were used by some people in the heroic age to get rid of people they considered undesirable. In the early days when the word psychiatry did not exist, the field was called alienism. The first textbook was published in 1758 under the title Treatise on Madness. The insane asylums were being opened and filled to overflowing. Moreover, strange and inexplicable behavior was found in all social classes, including the ruling dynasties. A profession was needed to halt this trend and make the insane normal again. This profession was psychic medicine, which Johann Christian Reil christened psychiatry, or psychic medicine, in 1808. Psychology was the science of the soul, which had evolved from philosophy with the aim of obtaining scientific proof of the nature of the soul, and of revealing and systematizing the faculties and laws of the soul by following the precise techniques of scientific methodology. Psychiatry was established to discover the causes of madness and to eliminate madness. Both disciplines were born with a pure and noble purpose, and from the beginning, their intentions and activities were truly scientific. 6. In the early 1800s, as psychiatric departments were being established, there was a heated debate about the causes and treatment of madness. This was the first public opposition to psychiatry, and many more followed. Public figures and celebrities alike protested the inhuman treatment of patients by their psychiatrists. The aims were clear, but the practice much less so. What was happening in the asylums was nothing less than exorcism. I will state this as bluntly as possible. There was exorcism in the madhouses, nothing more. Mass exorcism, without crosses, holy water, prayer, or priests. Here we were, witness to a strange custom which goes back a very long time, and which has passed unnoticed throughout history, always remaining an instrument of power. Torture for military reasons was intended to overcome secrecy. The other type of torture, known in Western culture as exorcism, was aimed at eradicating a pattern of behavior. They would take a 10-year-old child who was still wetting the bed, put them on a chair, and begin to spin them around for hours. This was repeated every day until the child stopped wetting the bed, or died, or went completely mad. So psychiatry practiced exorcism, that is, torturing people to erase patterns of behavior. Initially, neither psychiatry nor psychology was considered a science. To be accepted as a science, they had to have their own specialization, separate from all other sciences. Traditionally, only philosophy and religion dealt with the human being alone. At that time, the division was such that on the one side there was philosophy, religion, and the occult, magic, alchemy, astrology, and so on. And on the other side, science, which was gaining in recognition, dealing with the material universe, mainly with its measurement. The supreme caste wanted to make both psychology and psychiatry sciences, because philosophy, religion, and occultism were beginning to be marginalized at the time, as the caste found them ineffective in spreading lies. Because of this ambition, psychology and psychiatry began to approach and explain the human being from a physical perspective. However, the body was dealt with by biology and medicine, so something new had to be invented. Thus came the speculative thesis that there is no part of the human body outside of the body. That is, there is nothing but the body. Psychology defined itself as the science of behavior and began to look for the cause of behavior in the body. Psychiatry wanted to deal with madness and its cure, and since it is in the brain that the nerves meet, they declared that the brain was the cause of behavior. So they dealt with the brain. The behavioral patterns that early psychologists observed did exist, and the phenomena that psychiatrists at the time described as madness also existed. The way they were described, however, was false. Interestingly, the existence of the soul was not completely dismissed at the outset, and it was still part of the conception of the human being in psychology and psychiatry until the turn of the century. However, in 1879, in Leipzig, Wilhelm Wundt declared that he had scientifically proven that a human being was nothing more than a soulless animal. And although the word soul was still used in some cases, it was no longer understood to mean what it had before, not an immaterial reality, but merely a summary name for brain function. 7. The history of research is part of the history of science and deals with the development and historical background of research on a subject or topic. What is most interesting is the fact that Wundt did not write down a single word about the experiment that led him to his epic-making discovery that humans have no souls. This is even more curious because the most important claim in history has no research history whatsoever. None. Not a single word. Before 1879, and since then, up to the present day, no one has ever conducted any formal scientific research to establish what a human being is. In the entire history of research, which is an incredible amount of documents and computer data, from the very first record to the very last, there is not a single word about any experiment to find out whether man has a soul or not. Nor did Wundt perform any such experiment. He simply stated that he had scientifically proven it, and the matter was settled. Translating all this into the language of reality, Wilhelm Wundt was the first authority to be placed by the supreme caste alongside this thought idol, which, like all other thought idols, is a lie. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt, in his book Human and Animal Psychology, wrote, "Thought, personality, and behavior are nothing more than chemical reactions in the brain." With this sentence, the darkest age in history began. 8. Psychiatry and psychology were already dangerous tools when it came to diagnosing and curing madness. The demon was truly released when they began to prevent madness. It was then that the scope of psychology and psychiatry became limitless. They appeared in all walks of life, in all professions, in art, in science. They interfered in education, in politics, in law enforcement, and even, strangely enough, in clerical training. The development of madness, they argue, can be prevented by treating the person at the first signs of madness. Even better, it can be prevented by treating everyone from birth. And for all these existing purposes, the words madness, insanity, mental disorder, and mental illness are nowhere defined with scientific rigor in the entire literature of psychiatry and psychology, nor is their opposite, normality. In general, psychiatric institutions are cleaner than asylums once were. Fewer people are beaten to death today, and fewer people die in these institutions, although still a shockingly high number do. Today, fewer people wallow in their own excrement and fewer scream. But they still practice exorcism. Psychiatry still subjects people to torture with the aim of changing their behavior. However, the big danger is not that practically anyone can be locked up for any length of time based on the opinion of a single authority figure. It is not that the authority figures in psychology and psychiatry can deprive people of their humanity, their sanity, or their credibility. It's not that they are there in the governments of the world, behind the politicians, behind the heads of states, giving their say in their speeches and in their decisions. All these dangers are enormous, yet negligible. Now, millions of people around the world are in some kind of psychiatric institution, but that is not particularly important either. 9. What is important, what is really essential in all this, is the worldview, the totally unsubstantiated and untested materialist view of the human being in psychiatry and psychology, which is believed by billions and is considered the official worldview by almost every country on earth. The point is that at this moment in time, in all the technically and militarily advanced states of the world, the official worldview is materialism, propagated by the supreme caste through psychiatry and psychology. Governments that possess weapons of mass destruction capable of wiping out life on Earth, and that have a decisive influence on the ecology of the planet through the industries of the countries they control, believe in an officially sanctioned worldview according to which life has no purpose, no meaning, no good, no evil, and no responsibility, because once the heart stops beating, actions no longer count for anything. That is the point. The rest is nothing compared to this. Chapter 16. Those damn memories. The 16th lesson about the world. 1. Most people are confused about the difference between the basic teachings of materialism and the basic teachings of religions, so they accept theorems from both and do not realize that they contradict each other. According to materialism, the brain thinks and the brain stores memories. It is a very interesting phenomenon that many religious people believe this, including priests and ministers. It is also interesting because if the brain does either of these things, then there is no soul and no God. If there are memories in the brain, they are destroyed when the body dies. If the brain is thinking, then after the body dies, the thinking ceases. If the brain makes decisions, then the ability to make decisions ceases when the body decays. If this is the case, what would be the role of the soul? Then, what are the properties of the soul? The soul does not record memories, does not store memories, does not remember, does not think, and does not decide. So, what does it do? What is left? Nothing. And if something does nothing, it is nothing. 2. How many memories do you think a 50-year-old person has? We know from daily experience that our memory is like a three-dimensional film. A film is made up of frames, and because we can stop the memory at any point and block out any scene, just like a film, we know that the basic unit of memory is the image. which is like a frame in a film. In very old films, the movement is rather strange, unreal, fragmented, and comic. This is because too many or too few images were projected per second. But with a little experimentation, they discovered that if you really want realistic movement, you must project 24 to 25 frames per second. This figure is a basic axiom of the technical side of filmmaking. So, based on the realistic movement seen on film, we can conclude that a human being records about 24 to 25 memory images per second. Let's take 25 as a basis and do some math. That's 1,500 per minute, 90,000 per hour, 2,160,000 per day, and 788,400 per year. That's 39,420,000,000 memories in 50 years. A three-dimensional, full-color memory. Now, where can the body hold all that memory? We have 39.5 billion memories. Where do we put them? And how big is a memory? And what does it look like? What shape does it take? And the most important question, what is a memory image as a physical thing? What is its weight? What is it like? What is its temperature? What is it made of? Does a memory image of a cat look like a cat or like a photograph? And if you look at it with a magnifying glass or a microscope, can you see that it is a cat? 3. For a cell to function, regardless of where it is in the body and what function it performs, it needs to perform a number of essential tasks that are independent of its location and role in the body. The cell needs to feed, metabolize, divide, and perform its function. The cell wall is not meant to store memories, nor is the nucleus, nor the chromosomes, nor the enzymes, nor the DNA, nor the genes, and so on. Suppose there are memory-storing cells in the body. Even in that case, these cells would have to survive, and to do so they would have to perform certain tasks, regardless of whether they store memories. Where, then, would the memory cells store the memories, and how? How is the memory of, say, a purring cat stored? And how is the memory stored in the memory cells? And a very important question, what looks at the memories in the memory cells, and how? What goes to the cell and looks inside? How does it know which cell contains one memory or another? What is that thing that moves around in the brain, keeping track of which memory is in which cell, goes into the cells, looks at those memories, interprets them, and thinks? What does that? Again, just cells, a more special kind of cell than ever before? And when these memory cells that store memories divide, are the memories encoded into the DNA? How? In what way? And what would be the genetic code for the memory of a purring cat? 4. What can think in the body? Which part of the body? The brain, the materialist authorities say. And which part of the brain? What is left of the brain after we have taken out all the parts of it that are reasonably intended to perform bodily functions? Thinking requires orders of magnitude more capacity than memory storage and processing. And while memory storage is mechanical, thinking is not. A good example of this is computing, where data storage and retrieval is not difficult at all, while artificial intelligence is underdeveloped, to say the least. Indeed, some researchers say it has not even really been invented yet, and some say it is not even possible. The answer to every awkward question in materialism is, the brain is a very complicated organ. Scientifically, this statement is about the same as saying, God works in mysterious ways. The brain is in reality and demonstrably the communication center of the body and nothing else. Influences from outside the body and stimuli from processes within the body reach the brain, and all the stimuli that control the body originate in the brain and go anywhere in the body at will. This is not just a hypothesis. Every part of the brain has a precise function. It either receives information or sends information out. The brain does nothing else. This information is nothing more than an electrical or chemical signal. No part of the brain is capable of recording or storing any kind of memory, or of processing memories, or of perceiving, analyzing, evaluating, or weighing information, or of forming opinions, planning, learning, or making decisions. The brain is a communication organ, the brain's communication center, which collects all the sensations of the body, and through which the body can be controlled. 5. Genes have their very own important role in the body. Genes contain the blueprint of the body's structure and function, so genetics is a science that could play a huge role in the future if it is not completely suppressed. But there is another kind of genetics besides scientific genetics. This other genetics is pseudogenetics, which drips lies into the world under the guise of real science. This pseudogenetics is a pseudoscience, an ideology. This ideological genetics uses the terms of scientific genetics to promote the lies of the supreme caste. Ideological genetics claims that genes determine a person's personality, their goals, their intelligence, their desires, what their sexual orientation is, what their favorite color is, what their favorite smell is, and so on. So in fact, everything is determined by genes. Well, there is a problem with that. One point is that genes have no connection with the world in which we as humans live. For instance, they have no concept of the existence of colors, without even mentioning more complicated examples. Genes know nothing about the world. They have no knowledge of the world at all. The other thing is that genes have a function. Genes determine the basic structure and the basic functioning of the body, which is influenced by several things, such as nutrition, exercise, and so on. That is, if someone does not eat properly, for example, their body will not be exactly as it should be according to their genetic program. The third is that no one has ever seen a gene do anything, not ever. No one in the world has ever seen a gene influence someone's thinking or judgment, such as their perception of color. And the fourth, there is not even a model, not even a vaguely sketched concept, to explain how genes make someone like classical music, for example. Because, of course, according to genetic ideology, musical taste is also determined by genes. There are thousands of factors other than genes that can explain the similarities in behavior within a family, or the fact that several generations within a family choose the same profession. Furthermore, genealogical research as research into the role of genes in personality is only concerned with probabilities as a kind of prediction, not facts, and so cannot be considered scientific research or scientific evidence. The thought idol lurking at the bottom of genetic ideology is a lie that says there is no soul. Genetic ideology itself is a system of arguments that argues in favor of this lie and claims that the abilities of the soul are in fact the abilities of the genes. That is all. 6. There is no evidence in the history of research to show that the brain remembers or thinks, or that genes determine personality in any way. There have been, and still are, people who have suffered brain damage because of an accident, crime, or illness, and survived. But the damage has resulted in sudden or gradual, minor or major, temporary or permanent changes in their behavior, their attitude to life, and to other people. Researchers working to justify materialism observe what behavioral and other mental changes these people undergo, compared this with the location and nature of the brain injury, and thus tried to deduce which part of the brain is the source of which mental function. This is the only evidence that the brain has the capacities of the soul, that is, that the soul does not exist. However, there are some counter-arguments that come to mind as soon as we ignore the persuasion of authority. 1. These cases are sometimes documented in a staggeringly sloppy, shockingly unscientific way, and are consequently unacceptable as scientific research. 2. There are false, fictitious accounts of cases that never happened. 3. Countless incorrect and premature conclusions have been drawn from the case histories, some of which contain logical blunders, illogical to a degree that would be unacceptable and a subject of public ridicule in any real field of science. 4. The conclusions have not been verified. There is no direct evidence of any kind, and even materialist authorities admit this. 5. People who have suffered damage to a particular area of their brain do not always change in the same way and to the same degree. 6. Injury to any part of the body can cause equally spectacular and lasting changes in personality. 7. In most cases, in which a person's behavior or some mental ability has changed suddenly and dramatically, the brain is not damaged anywhere. A person with a zest for life receives a phone call that cripples them for life, leaving them a shadow of their former self. A single piece of news, bad enough or good enough, can trigger a flurry of changes that can be startlingly large, last a lifetime, and very diverse. Positron emission tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, magnetoencephalography. These are some frighteningly complex terms that cover even more complex equipment and procedures. These are instrumental studies of the brain. Despite their complexity, they do nothing more than show that there is some activity in the brain. But we already knew this. Nor can this be taken as evidence for the scientific claim that there is no soul. 7. During scientific research into the physical universe, everything eventually becomes a slide under the microscope, or some powdered substance, or some liquid at the bottom of a test tube, or some gas in the confines of a bell jar, or numbers, graphs, and test results, or photographs, films, and sound recordings. Materialism holds that there is no soul, no God. The brain thinks and stores memories, and genes determine personality. I would like to ask you to think and try to figure out what you would have to see under a microscope, at the bottom of a test tube, in the confines of a bell jar, on a piece of paper, a photograph, a film, or a sound recording that would prove that there is no God, or that there is no soul, or that the brain thinks, or that the brain stores memories, or that your genes determine your personality. Have fun for the rest of your life. Chapter 17. The Study of the Soul. The 17th lesson about the world. 1. We know that immense sins have been committed in the name of God or certain gods. We know that people can be driven mad by superstitions about ghosts and the like. Both belief in God and belief in the soul can be used to dominate the masses, to paralyze thought and action of the masses. In this case, however, we must also consider the possibility that belief in God and belief in the soul is as much a manipulative system of ideas as materialism and serves no other purpose than to restrain people. And this is true. It is absolutely true. These systems are no different from materialism in their use. But this chapter is not about religions, philosophies, or the occult. If we were to examine them closely and discard the claims of authority, we would find that none of them stand the test of logic, and certainly not scientific verification. The question is now, is the soul, or God, a thought idol or not? The Supreme Caste has created philosophies, religions, and occult teachings. But why did they do it? Are they ideologies that sought to sell people a deep-seated thought idol? Or did they take a truth and throw lies and superstitions at it until the whole system became so loaded and irrational that the very truths on which it was based seemed to be lies? Did the Supreme Caste want to discredit the subject of the soul and God with stupid, dogmatic, blind, violent, and unrealistic religions and other spiritual doctrines? It is time to think through some principles, forgetting the obligatory blind devotion to authority figures. What could possibly prove that there is a soul? And what could prove that there is a God? 2. The phenomenon of a person supposedly remembering the name they bore in another life, or a previous place of residence, does not prove that there is a soul, nor does it prove that the soul changes bodies over time as people change clothes. Two people drawing the same thing at the same moment, 1,000 kilometers apart, still does not prove the existence of a soul. If someone suddenly starts speaking a language fluently that they have never learned, or overnight becomes a master in a field they have never studied in their current life, or without any prior knowledge, suddenly comes up with some mathematical equations that solve unsolvable problems, or without the slightest prior training, overnight produce flawless and precise design documentation for a hitherto unknown computer, vehicle, engine, or power generating unit. That might not sound bad, but even that would be circumstantial evidence at best, and it is not acceptable in real science. So what could be the evidence for the existence of a soul? Think about it. What would prove that there is a soul? A person lying on an operating table, watching their body being worked on by surgeons. Not bad is a subjective, personal kind of evidence, although it might be worth treating the experience with caveats, given the peculiar circumstances. But from a scientific point of view, the accounts of people returning from clinical death are utterly useless. Why? Because a scientific observation must be documentable. But how do you document something that a dead person has observed? A scientific observation must be an experiment. An experiment, that is, a conscious observation, all the circumstances of which are known and professionally documented, so that it can be repeated elsewhere at another time, by others at any time, and the same experience can be gained. But how and who will repeat an experiment that requires death? And how can anything be considered even a little objective if it consists of nothing more than an account of one person's own memories? 3. Out-of-body existence would be evidence of the existence of a soul, assuming that we can consciously and deliberately produce this phenomenon at any given time under orderly laboratory conditions. Thus, if we could devise a method by which a person could be free from being confined to their body, and could exist continuously and freely outside their body, sensing outside their body, not through their bodily senses, all the while their body is alive, well, moving, talking, doing what is done to them, then this would indeed be evidence of a soul. Well, we've gone beyond that. In 1952, a series of privately funded experiments proved the existence of a soul in laboratory conditions, in the manner mentioned above. It is worth noting that there are millennia-old records of the same thing, and since some of the descriptions of the time are fairly accurate accounts of the phenomena scientifically experienced in 1952, there is indeed such a thing as what some call lost knowledge. Since then, thousands of experiments have been carried out all over the world, all with the same results, and all documented as scientific claims. And of course, all of them have been funded by private individuals with their own private money, because since the world began, Only individual experimentation can achieve real results. For shorter or longer periods of time, a state can be created in which a person can move, live, think, remember, make decisions, and act freely from their body, and control their body from a greater or lesser distance. When I tested the method myself, I was out of my body for about half a minute for the first time, for almost 5 minutes the second time, and for a full 61 days the third time. And I lived my life while doing it, feeling indescribably free. This experience was the main reason why I finally faced the Supreme Caste. If you believe that science is what is written in the textbooks, and that politics has no power over science, you have no idea what treasures people have discovered. As late as 1952, the complete documentation was offered to countless scientific academies, universities of science, and scientific journals, but all refused to read it, publish it, deal with it, or verify it. Why have they refused? For only one reason. The soul cannot be the subject of science, since Wilhelm Wundt declared so long ago that it does not exist. 4. There is another important question. What is the significance of being a soul and not a body? Would it make sense that it makes you less afraid of death? If that is all it is, it's not much. At some point in one's life, a person learns something, knows something, but forgets it. If we can find the reason why they forgot it, they can remember it again. They have the knowledge they had before. Imagine if they forgot not 1 year's knowledge or 20 years' knowledge, but 1,000 years' knowledge, or 1,000,000 years' knowledge. And imagine that there is a way to remember everything you have ever known. One person becomes a timid adult because they were often frightened and hurt as a child. Another becomes obsessed with sex because it requires little intellect, and they've noticed that they don't achieve much recognition elsewhere. Our personality is nothing more than a habit of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Over 10, 50, or 100 years, we form habits in ourselves. That is, we build our personality. And now, imagine that for 1,000 years, or 1,000,000 years, we do the same. Imagine how many inhibitions we can have, how many sins we can have, how many mistakes we can make. Imagine 1,000,000 years of being filled with lies, 1,000,000 years of failure, 1,000,000 years of losing loved ones, 1,000,000 years of pain and injustice. What if it is not 1,000,000 years, but 10 million, or 100 million, or 1,000,000,000? Imagine if there was a way to get rid of the evil that has accumulated in us during this immeasurable time. What would we be without all of this? So whether we are souls or atoms has a huge significance. It is beyond words. 5. Proving the existence of the soul is not a big task, but how can we prove that God exists? But perhaps let's not go to such extreme lengths, and just talk about what could prove that there is something superior to Homo sapiens. To begin to theorize or research in this area, we must first define what a human being is. What is a human being? What is the scientific definition of the term human being? Well, human is not scientifically defined. Instead, we have ridiculously unscientific definitions, such as that a human being is the dominant life form on the planet. So if a virus one day wipes out humanity, would that virus be a superhuman virus? If we approach life from a materialist perspective, it is doomed to failure. But we can approach life in other ways, but we need to know what the essence of life is. What is the most significant difference between a living person and a dead person? Action, right? Purposeful, conscious action. A living person can do this to some extent. A dead person can't do it at all. A living person has some self-determination, some ability to determine their life, their future, their environment. A dead person lacks all of this. We can say that the purpose of life is to find happiness, or to achieve great goals, or to shape history, or something like that. But if we compared a dead body with a living person, we find much more fundamental, more essential differences. A living person can think something and do what they have thought of, even if it is as small as raising their hand or saying a word. A dead person cannot do that, not to any degree. There is no life in them. So the essence of life is that we have the power to do something. We could draw a scale of existence, of life, of self-determination, of having the power to do something, and tick the levels from 0 to infinity. 0 would be the lowest level of existence. 0 self-determination. Infinity would be the highest level of life, infinite self-determination, and infinite power to do something. On the scale of life, we would have to put objects at 0, because objects do not think, decide, or act. That is, they do not have any degree of self-determination. They simply exist. There is no life in objects. On the scale of life, we should put plants at 1, just above objects. Plants are capable of a minimum of self-determination. We know they have some senses. They are not indifferent to influences. They feel pain. Some things are more favorable to them, others less favorable. It's a new quality on the scale. It's the lowest degree of self-determination, but it is real self-determination. On the scale of life, we can put animals at number 2. Animals have more self-determination than plants, so there is more life in animals, even if a species of plant is more resistant to certain influences than some animals. In man, again, a new quality appears: consciousness. We see no traces of consciousness in animals. In animals, there is a total absence of research, of understanding, of desire, and the need to develop. No animal species has developed a philosophy, a religion, a science, an art, a technique, a way of life, or a higher state of being, and has not created anything to control its environment. With this in mind, and considering proportionality, not without some arbitrariness, if we put animals at 2, we should put man at 100. At one end of the scale are the objects as symbols of no life, of no self-determination, and at the other end is God, the symbol of infinite self-determination, of infinite life. God, it is said, is omniscient and omnipotent, and this is a necessary precondition for unlimited self-determination. Therefore, God is a very different entity from objects, but not a completely different entity from plants, animals, and man, because these forms of existence already possess some degree of self-determination. I did not, of course, think this through for the first time in history. Countless philosophers have done it, and you can do it, or have done it, and all you need is some common sense. But let's go further, because the above reflection prompts us to ask countless questions. Is this what existence would look like? Is this what life would look like? Would it look so disproportionate? Would nature be this chaotic? Are there objects, plants, animals, humans, and God? Is that all there would be? 6. There is not so much difference between plants and animals that we can say there must be some form of life we do not know that lies between the two, although we cannot rule out the possibility. However, there is quite a difference between humans and animals, so would it not be logical to suggest that there should be some transition between humans and animals? And what about between humans and God? What about the immense distance between man and God? Would it be empty? Are there no degrees of conscious self-determination? Of course, I cannot comment on God because I do not know what could scientifically prove the existence of God. But the existence of something beyond humanity is very much provable. Humans have a certain amount of life in them. They have a certain amount of self-determination. And it is obvious that more self-determination is possible. Myths are full of such beings, and if we pay attention not to their alleged exotic deeds and appearances, but to the extent of their self-determination, we will no longer dispose of them so easily with a wave of the hand. A vampire, for example, has few human limits. For instance, their bodies don't age, and they are not harmed by a common bullet. A human would be destroyed far earlier under the conditions where a vampire can still perceive, think, decide, and act. It is therefore a superhuman state of being. This is not to say that legends about vampires are true, although I cannot disprove all of them, but some of them seem extremely plausible. In parentheses, I'll note a few thoughts about the vampire myth. First, I did not invent it, and in my 25 years of service to the caste, I have had nothing to do with this myth. Second, I don't believe in vampires, and to my knowledge, I have never met a single vampire. I've merely spent a long enough time spinning lies, and I recognize the handiwork of the supreme caste. The vampire myth, as it is known in Western culture, is a Christian parable. That is all, and no more. This myth is an advertisement for religion. Where does it come from? Can it be founded on any truth? I do not want to answer that, but my answer would not be very important. What is important is that the supreme caste in every age and in every land has created some enemies. If they wanted to get rid of somebody, or just to create a little confusion, they would declare with immense authority that someone, or a group of people, were the enemy, and all hell would break loose. The caste has always been very generous in creating enemy images and fomenting conflict. 7. The answer to the question posed at the beginning of this chapter is that the supreme caste took a truth and treated it as a thought idol. It built an ideology, a religion, a philosophy around the truth, all parts of which were lies, and thus discredited the truth hidden deep within. The themes of the soul and the divine were explored. They made them into superstitions, irrational and obsolete. In other words, they made them into a burden for human beings. The soul originally meant that the essence of man was immortal, timeless, something independent of the physical universe. In the beginning, God was not seen as a tyrant of immense power, but merely man's certainty that evolution was possible. The word God meant infinite, that there was a way upward. At the dawn of civilization, the certainty that humans were so strongly convinced that they were souls and that there was room for improvement was so strong that the supreme caste had no other option but to engage in a long, long campaign of discredit. And why was it so important for them to arrive at materialism? Because if one believed that there was a soul and there was a path upward, the caste could not feel safe, because at any moment somebody might realize something. Somebody might discover something. The first monopoly in civilization was the soul and God. It started with aggressive religions that murdered anyone who dared to contradict the dogmas. Then, the latest dogma outright declared that the soul does not exist. Throughout history, the greatest taboo has been the search for the soul. In every age, it has been met with death. When the supreme caste began to replace religions, they allowed into the world perhaps the greatest achievement of disciplined thinking, which is nothing less than the methodology of scientific research. This is what made technical progress possible. The caste let technology into the world, which seemed a miracle in the eyes of people who were crippled by superstition, and then they started a huge effort of propaganda to conflate technology, science, and materialism. This is how they dull the mind and make people deny themselves by accepting materialism. The methodology of scientific research is a way of knowing reality. You don't have to believe in anything. It is the means to find and know anything that exists, including the soul, including God. That is why the soul and God are today as huge a taboo as they ever have been. The soul is said not to exist, and God is said to be a subject for religions, and science cannot investigate God. This is called defending the sanctity of religion. But it is not that. It is just protecting a superstition. It is protecting the remnants of the old system. The methodology of scientific research has allowed for the technological advances that have created the technology for the supreme caste to spread anything in seconds, to keep everyone under surveillance, and to wipe humanity off the map in a day. Technological progress is called development, and humanity has been given TV, computers, airplanes, and hair dye, but in return, we have had to forget our souls. There is nothing in materialism to research or worth researching. This worldview contains no truth at all. So the supreme caste is safe. This is the reason why I attack materialism so strongly in this book. The questions of the soul and God are not religious questions, not questions of faith, but the most important fields of research in science. There can be no taboos for science. Chapter 18. The Big Nightmare. The 18th lesson about the world. 1. Wherever we are always somewhere, and we are always going somewhere. In between these 2 points, our location and our destination, is a path we must follow to get to that destination. On this road, our actions are our steps, not our words. The alcoholic who constantly talks about getting sober, but who never stops drinking, will not get sober because their actions are not moving them in the direction of quitting. It is not the words that count, it's the actions. What goal is looming in the distance toward which humanity is being driven by its own actions? It is so easy to see the state we are heading toward, but it is difficult to comprehend that this is the direction in which we are heading. What do you think? Forget the plans and the hopes that are being voiced, because neither words nor hope are steps on the road. Just look at the actions. What do you predict for us, for humanity? Do you believe that crime will one day disappear, just like that, overnight? Do you think there will be international conflicts, local wars, riots, famine, and pandemics? What do you predict for terrorism? Do you think we are facing a world war? Do you think that weapons of mass destruction will be used against the population somewhere in the future? Will we get to the point where we will no longer be threatened by disease? Do you think that one day there will be world peace? Forget hope, forget words, forget trust, and just look where the facts are leading us. Where are we going? What is the direction? 2. The past was ugly, bloody, dark, and cruel. Our present is the same. Only our future is very different. The future we are heading for will be like no other. If you can't see it, I'll tell you. Our future is that we will sink. Not like Atlantis, not metaphorically speaking, but also not in a physical sense. This kind of sinking would truly be nothing. It will not be cities, countries, islands, or continents that will sink, but we ourselves, we humans will sink. And to where? Below humanity. We did not come from the animal world. We are heading there, and we are only an arm's length away. If you look at what we are doing and forget everything else, you will see that violence will become a much more integral part of our lives than it has been. Crime will increase many times what it is now. The types of crime will change, but overall, crime will be much worse than it is now. The characteristics of war will also change. There will be a lot of local wars, small local wars, and large-scale wars that will approach the scale of a world war. And there will be a world war. Watch the action, pay no attention to the words, and you will see it coming. 3. The conventional war tactic is army-on-army combat. War and the tensions of war have captured the attention, thoughts, and emotions of billions of people and determined many of their actions. Now, a whole new form of war is coming. This war will be brought about by the fight against international terrorism, and it will be a war that no army can fight. Did you see Belfast and Jerusalem when the hatred really flared up? Did you see reports on television of the Irish and the British, or the Palestinians and the Israelis fighting each other in the streets, everywhere, with all kinds of weapons, attacking with unexpected and overwhelming force? This is guerrilla warfare. A guerrilla world war is coming. September 11 and the fall of the World Trade Center was just the firing of the starting pistol. Guerrilla warfare will be fought in every city from Moscow to Bucharest, Belgrade to London, New York to Los Angeles, Sydney to Tokyo. Well, this is our future as far as violence is concerned. 4. Look at the economy. Look at the laws and political intentions governing industry. Where do they point? At this moment, we have all the evidence we need in order to know. Industry, coal, oil-based machinery, and power plants that are damaging the environment. And if this does not change, even the most optimistic estimates are that in 200 to 300 years, the surface of the earth will be uninhabitable. What happens next? They're discrediting the doomsaying scientists. They're discrediting environmental activists and organizations. They do not accept or adhere to the necessary regulations, saying that the interests of the economy dictate that we shouldn't change the industry. Some great authority figures have declared, the death of humanity is in the interest of the economy. You know that in the materialist worldview, nothing has any consequences. Materialism will eventually supplant everything. There will be no philosophies, no religions. People will be obedient slaves. No one will dream. No one will imagine a free world, because no one will be in a state to imagine such a thing. Sit back, close your eyes, relax, and imagine a species giggling at everything, completely at peace and unable to think or act. Pretty, isn't it? According to the Supreme Caste, it is. 5. The actions are leading to a future in which materialism will achieve total world domination. You now know exactly all the tenets of materialism's worldview. Imagine where this will end. The only future that materialism offers is death. You are born, go to school, work, eat, sleep, make love, grow old, and die. This is all that awaits you in the materialist worldview. This worldview is so insane that simply believing in it will destroy you, because if death is an invincible boogeyman, then nothing makes sense. And then, why not do whatever comes to mind? Why not destroy your health? Why not be immoral? Why not kill anyone who comes your way? Why not lose our minds completely? If death is invincible, then there is nothing but the experience of the moment. And if, stupefied by invincibility, we will one day desire to rape children, or to dissect our own children while still alive, or our mother or our father, why not? Isn't it all the same once there is nothing but destruction? And if we've come this far, why stop here? Why not create a great war? Why not use every weapon we have? Nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons. If we do it right, billions of people will die. That'll be fun. And maybe we could make a bomb much bigger than the ones we have. Say, 1 teraton. Such a bomb has an explosive yield about 100 million times greater than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A hydrogen bomb or an antimatter bomb that, when detonated, would crack the Earth's crust. Oh, those will be the days. Magma erupts to the surface. Volcanoes paint the sky red. Such is the insanity of materialism, which is made up entirely of lies. And one fine day, which, as the years go by, may well begin any morning now, the world will collapse. And the new dawn will come. Who can say how many times this has already happened? So, this is the future I have worked for 25 years to bring about, and on which the Supreme Caste is working with all its apparatus at this very moment. Chapter 19. Your Responsibility. The last lesson about the world. 1. This is the last and most important chapter of the book. If you dismiss all the previous chapters as nonsense, but take this one to heart, then this book has achieved its purpose. 2. What is the final lesson about the world? It is your responsibility. In other words, the final lesson is that your life is still in your hands, and the world can be changed. It is possible that everything I've told you in this book has upset you and made you think, then what's the point of anything? After all, who would have the power to stand up to the Supreme Caste? Who would be able to break through the army of authority figures, to climb out of the web of economic trickery, to free their minds from the lies, and survive the violence of law, war, and crime? Who? I will tell you. You. 3. Ultimately, we still have the agreement we made at the very beginning of the book. If you want, feel free to call me crazy. Tell me I'm lying, delirious, or whatever you see fit. After all, with what can I prove that what I've written is true? Good question. And the answer is very simple. With nothing directly. I cannot present you with direct evidence. I can give you indirect proof. All the news in the media and all the events in the world. But indirect evidence is worthless from a scientific point of view. So what does it all add up to? All we must talk about is the principle, because the book is nothing but a collection of statements, not facts. Any way you look at it, it's just a book, and it proves nothing more than that there is language, there is writing, and there is printing. That is all, and nothing more. So you have become thoroughly upset in the previous pages, perhaps for nothing. Perhaps not a word of what I said is true. Why should it be? But why shouldn't it be? You see, the moment you go beyond the scope of your own personal experience, the moment a subject comes up that you cannot verify or would be extremely difficult to investigate, you are straying into a swampland where you have little chance, because you can and will be misled, so much so that you can't even imagine it. You are stuck in a mass of partial truths and lies. This mass is dense. It has been shaped for thousands of years. It has been layered, and it is so opaque that there is no word for it. This mass cannot be dismantled. It cannot be subdued. There is no sharp mind, no iron logic that does not get stuck in it. There is only one solution. Do you know the legend of the Gordian knot? You'll find the solution there. 4. In Buddhism, the highest spiritual state is called Buddha. The highest state before this is called Bodhisattva. I once spoke to a Bodhisattva who explained to me what he had achieved. He told me that he doesn't identify with his body, his memories, or his thoughts, only with his consciousness. No matter what he has been in the past, no matter what he feels or thinks, it has no effect on him. He said he either knows something or he doesn't know something, and what he doesn't know, he doesn't form an opinion about. What he doesn't know, he doesn't form an opinion about. There stood before me a man who described as knowledge that which he himself had experienced, and what he had not experienced he called nothing, and formed no opinion about it, formed no thought about it. He didn't know what the shape of the earth was, and he had no imagination of the shape of the earth. He did not know how wide the Atlantic Ocean was, and he had no thoughts about how many thousands of kilometers it was. This Bodhisattva was the freest being I have ever encountered in my life. He was a man over whom the supreme caste had no power. All the authority figures in the world could not make him accept anything. They couldn't get a grip on him. He defeated the system, alone and unarmed. 5. I know exactly the level of discipline it requires, but there is no other way to free yourself from the grip of the strongest handcuffs. You must make a rule that what you don't know, you don't comment on. Most artists, philosophers, and scientists cannot do this. They do not realize that they are constantly producing opinions like a machine. You must stop this machine. It is your only chance against the supreme caste. Whatever else you try, you're certain to walk into their trap. It's inevitable. 6. The law can do some very interesting things. The word itself implies rights, which are a form of freedom, yet it often seems to signify the opposite. What you have the right to do, you have the freedom to do. What you have no right to do, you cannot do with impunity. Law is based on laws, and laws are made, adopted, and enforced by humans. In this book, I can write anything I want, freely, without restriction, as long as I don't use specific people's names and write anything unfavorable about them. No one can legally attack me. However, if I start writing about what you can do against the supreme caste, how to live in this world, in this system of the supreme caste, and how to overthrow the power of the caste, I can easily slip into the category of someone attacking me through the law, and this book would get banned. So, all I can tell you here and now is that there is a solution. You can live safely in this world, in this system, and you can rise above it. How? Look on the internet. You will find it there. I am Julius Andan, and if you search for me, you will find the tools. 7. Within the bounds of the law, I can only give you a few pieces of advice, which you can follow if you like, or discard at your own discretion. 1. If you form an opinion, you will surely fall into the trap of the caste. 2. Find what you are really interested in and what can be of use to the world, and master it. 3. Explore techniques to learn to manage stress, and do not get involved in the conflicts that are offered. 4. Seek out methods to develop your mind and become an expert in these methods. 5. Look for new ways and new answers. 6. Seek out alternative solutions to your problems. 7. Put aside your reasons and hopes and examine what your actions are leading you toward. If you don't like the direction you're taking, change. 8. Don't accept the official position as a given. Everything is invented and created by people. Governments, academies, and other organizations are not run by bodhisattvas. They are just as exposed to the efforts of the caste as you are. 9. Believe your own eyes. Have the confidence to examine things for yourself and not accept the claims of others. 10. Find your own world. You may not be living in the right environment for you, and this may be responsible for thousands of mistakes and failures. Think about it. Elvis Presley was the king, but what would he have been in a world where the only measure of human worth is how many trees you can chop down or how many goals you can score? In such a world, he would have been a nobody, not a king. You may not live in a world where you are appreciated for what you can do or for what you are. Hit the road and find your true home. 11. Don't watch the news on TV. Don't listen to the news on the radio. And don't read the news in the newspapers. They are there to confuse and upset you. 12. Do not reward bad examples. Don't buy or listen to records of people. Don't watch movies of people. Don't read the writings of people who are not setting a good example by their way of life and spreading a sane set of values. 13. Do not go into debt. This is a trap that has enslaved billions of people. 14. Don't break the law. If you do, you will be devoured. If the laws of one country are unbearable for you, go to another country. Earth is your true home. Everything on this planet is global, and everything belongs to everyone. 15. Travel the world, because what you have not seen with your own eyes, you know nothing about. You don't get knowledge from the media. You get messages. Do not confuse the two. Epilogue. 1. As a professional liar of the supreme caste, I have not lived a monastic life. I did not shut myself away within the thick walls of an underground bunker. I had to meet people, because I had to test my ideas in the field, watching every little reaction, carefully analyzing every effect. In summer of 2002, when I still wholeheartedly believed that humanity needed to be suppressed because without constraints it would rush to its destruction, I was working on an ideology aimed at getting society to accept a thought idol. Strict democracy is the future. Strict democracy is a dictatorship that looks like a democracy. in which, for example, there are elections, but at the same time, there is total repression of the individual. An ideology is a very complex thing. Some parts of it are for the average citizen. Other parts are for politicians. Other parts are for the military. Other parts are for the wealthy, and so on. Every social class and every influential profession gets different lies, different systems of arguments. In the summer of 2002, I arranged a meeting with a retired colonel who fought in both World War II and Vietnam. He had received many medals. He was a true war hero who feared no one, human or demon. In civilian life, he was an impeccable gentleman. To get a basic tone between us, I lied about having served as a young volunteer in Vietnam, where I had experienced the horrors of war. Of course, I was thoroughly trained about Vietnam and other wars. I read through a lot of documents on the subject. I looked at tens of thousands of photographs and spent at least 100 hours studying film footage from the period. I also used feature films and novels to develop my character. On the day, I felt I was fully prepared for the meeting. I was walking down the street and saw some video games in a shop window, one of which was set in the Second World War. I thought I would try it out and see if it would help me get more into the role. The colonel was a tough man. Despite his age, he had a razor-sharp wit and was almost as suspicious as I was. He believed me that I had been a soldier and that I had been to war, but not that I had been in countless live missions and had experienced the hell of war, because, he said, I was not that type. During our conversation, the colonel asked me what my worst war memory was. I replied that I had accidentally killed a friend. And the colonel started sobbing. He confessed to me that in Berlin in 1945, he had killed a friend by accident. And I told him, my eyes glistening with tears, how I had made my way to a trench in the machine gun fire, how I had run, curled up in the mud, M16 carbine in hand, and how when I turned the corner, I turned into a corner of a winding kilometer-long trench and fired a round into a crouching gunman, thinking he was a North Vietnamese soldier. But when I came to, I realized it was my friend. The colonel ate out of the palm of my hand from then on, opened up to me, and I was able to test the lie I had concocted to convince senior officers. But none of this happened to me. I've never been to war. In fact, I wasn't even a soldier. I was just playing a World War II video game, getting really into it, and letting myself feel the stress of war, before I found myself regularly shooting at my own teammates in the game, accidentally. Because I'd turn a street corner or the corner of a hallway, or someone would pop up in a window or from behind cover, and all I'd see was a gunman, and I'd immediately fire, lest I get shot. In this way, I learned more about the real war while playing than I ever learned from any book or movie. According to official figures, about 58 million people died in the Second World War. How many of those were killed by friendly fire? How many died because they were accidentally killed by their own comrades? How many committed suicide? And how many went mad because they accidentally killed their friends? In the hell of war, under the constant threat of death, who can tell the difference between the uniforms of different armies in less than 1/10 of a second, especially in the rain, snow, mud, at night? I don't know how many people died in this way, but probably millions. When I returned home from the meeting with the colonel, the first thing I did was to write a report to my senior officer, drawing his attention to the enormous danger posed by video games and asking for permission to destroy them. Permission was granted. My report said, among many other things, quote, "A truly realistic video game has the potential to allow people to experience and understand things we do not want them to understand. In a video game, the player can have insights that are relevant and real. Given that in a video game the player is not a reader or a spectator, but the actor himself, there is a limit to the extent to which we can manipulate their perceptions. Of all types of video games, action games are the most dangerous for us. Video games could become interactive storytelling art in the future, which would raise serious problems." End quote. I created the thought idol, "Video games are harmful," and then started to develop the ideology, a system of false arguments that would sell the central lie to the people, and video games as such would cease to exist. I focused on two aspects of the ideology. One was, "It's just a game, it's not serious," and the other was, "It makes gamers criminal." I was working to destroy an art in its heyday because of the dangers it posed to the supreme caste. I figured out that video games were behind school shootings. With the help of a few pundits, that is, professional liars, a huge uproar was generated. The reality is that the school shootings are caused by drugs for non-existent diseases. These non-existent illnesses are learning disabilities, attention deficit, and other such fictitious mental illnesses. These diseases do not exist. I made them all up. It is just another idea to cover up the bankruptcy of education. And the drugs are drugs like Ritalin and Prozac. You can look it all up. All the perpetrators of school shootings have taken Ritalin or other psychiatric drugs. There is not a single exception in any country. The fact that these drugs, which are given to millions of children, cause violence and suicidal tendencies, is so well known that they are even mentioned in pharmaceutical compendia in the list of side effects. And the reason they are side effects is because these are the main effects. These are the effects that these substances were invented for. Reality can be entirely different from appearance. 2. There are 3 very important questions left at the end of this book. The first question: has the supreme caste defeated humanity yet or not? The answer is clear: no. The second question follows from the answer to the first question. How is this possible? Because the supreme caste has all the power on earth, ideological, political, economic, and it has all the organs of violence, and it is waging a total war against humanity that has been going on for thousands of years and has always been completely one-sided because humanity has never known that it was at war with anyone. Despite all this, the supreme caste has still not achieved total victory. It still takes tremendous effort to maintain control, and there are still people who cause it minor and major problems. The real enemy of the supreme caste is the basic nature of humans themselves. It is this basic nature that must be permanently eradicated from the human being in order to achieve total victory. And as you can see, this is extremely difficult to do. Fundamentally, the human being is good and noble-hearted. We want to love. We want to make others happy. We want to live in peace. We want to understand everything, and we are looking to the distant future. This is the human being in its natural form, and not the way the media portrays people. The supreme caste must abolish this basic nature and create in its place a ruthless, unprincipled, endlessly selfish, living for the moment, miserable mental wreck of all people. That is its objective. I know this for a fact. The third question is, what will happen if the supreme caste achieves this goal? Well, If that happens, the wheel of history will stop. You could say that the reason why the supreme caste does not simply wipe out all of humanity is because it lives off of humanity. It is sustained by humanity. But what about the goal? What about the goal of the caste toward which the events and efforts are pointing? What is to be done with a species that is totally depraved, totally insane? Well, nothing. Then why is that the goal? Did they lie to me when they informed me of the purpose? I don't think so. It's all too obvious that this is where the world is headed. So why is it good for the supreme caste if everyone goes mad and the wheel of history stops? It is a great mystery, and unfortunately, I don't know what the answer is. I have only theories, no certainty. 3. Many times in the past months, I thought I would never get to this point, that I simply could not survive under this much pressure for so long. But I did. I am still alive and still writing. This book is a weapon, a 100-megaton tactical information bomb against the lies of the supreme caste. Understanding destroys lies, and the sole function of this book is to make the reader understand what is going on around them and why. For 25 years, I have been in the service of a secret and gigantic power. My task was to know the ideas, to know all that humanity has produced in the field of ideas throughout history. I had free access to the world's countless secret repositories, archives, and records. I did not know the secrets of the supreme caste, but I knew the secrets of humanity. I was able to study all the papers, documents, photographs, film, and sound recordings that were classified as top secret. I had to understand humanity's philosophies, ideologies, and legends. I prepared a kind of instruction manual for my client on how to distort the cultural heritage, religious teachings, philosophical directions, scientific theories and observations, and artistic or merely everyday propositions of various peoples. If I wanted to stop a piece of research because it threatened the established worldview, I would make a phone call, and a half an hour later the project would have lost all funding, lost the goodwill that surrounded it, and soon it would be gone. Only those who worked outside the institutionalized science had a chance. Only they could make discoveries that were really significant. But they could not validate their discoveries because they were not allowed into the field of institutionalized science. They were not given the opportunity to publish. They were not given the resources. And if they were very persistent and still survived, they were legislated against and destroyed by force. They could also do this without a law if they were not too big and the case was charged as a crime. My life was so simple. I had incredible power. But one day, I woke up. And now here I am, writing this book, and this invisible power is looking for me. I have committed the greatest sacrilege that can ever be committed. I have become a traitor to the supreme caste, to the established system. The only traitor since the world began. And I have nothing else in my life to be proud of but this one thing, that I betrayed the supreme caste. 4. We have come to the point that if the current structure and way the world works doesn't change, we will all die. The supreme caste has concealed knowledge and technology from humanity. The knowledge that we have not been allowed to know is unimaginably significant. With the fall of the supreme caste, the hidden knowledge and inventions will all be ours, and they are our only chance of survival. There are real truths. There are real facts. There are real problems and there are real solutions. The science of the soul exists. I have seen it. I have read the books. I've tested it myself. I've applied it. I have studied it. It is not materialist. It is simply true. Its propositions are experimentally verifiable. It has the power to bring human beings to their senses, to restore them to the capacity for self-determination, to a degree we have never been able to experience, while languishing under the oppression of the supreme caste. There is a real human science. For half a century, it has been hidden behind the wall, alongside countless inventions that the supreme caste, using its power, has concealed from you. Once they lose their power, this multitude of wonders will become part of our lives. The truth of a lie cannot be proven because there is nothing to prove, so the supreme caste deploys its authority figures, the veritable army of professional liars who prove and prove and prove, but prove nothing. The supreme caste substitutes evidence with its authority figures. It can do nothing else. But asserting is not proving, and all the combined authority figures of the universe do not have enough power to turn even the smallest lie into truth. 5. In the old days, if a person wanted adventure, the unknown awaited them. They could go to the poles, to the jungles, the seas, the countless unexplored regions of the world. Then suddenly, the word began to spread that the world was no longer unknown, that there were no more blank spots. But there are. Anyone who has never been to the Himalayas knows nothing about them. Anyone who has never gone diving in the waters of the Aegean Sea knows nothing about it. The world is as unknown to people today as it ever has been, and the number of possible adventures has not diminished. The media is not one of your senses. It's time to know the world, because you only think you know it. Appearances mask reality, but have no effect on it. Appearances are not real. Appearances are only appearances, and they only exist because someone has misperceived something. The universe is unimaginably vast and full of challenges. The removal of madness from our lives does not mean that we are doomed to boredom. On the contrary, it is only then that the real adventure begins. The supreme caste is not perfect. It can be challenged. If we no longer take the media seriously, if we no longer believe in authority figures, if we no longer accept the answers offered, and if we no longer enter the conflict situations that are thrown at us, we have already done our part. And if enough people do their part, the power of the supreme caste will collapse. There is no need for reckless moves, suicide attacks, armed violence, cross-continental maneuvers, or martyrdom. None of these have ever worked. All that is needed is for you to change yourself. If you don't believe what they want you to believe, if you believe your own eyes more than all the authorities in the universe, you've beaten them. It is as simple as that, and that is the reality. 6. The system quietly lurking beneath the surface is a vast machine, far larger, far more extensive, and incomparably more powerful than any empire historians have written about. Its only weakness is that it is not perfect. Its imperfection manifests itself in its gigantic nature, in the fact that it cannot see everything. It simply cannot see things and events smaller than a certain scale. No one knows more than they need to know. No one is privy to more secrets than they need to know to do their job. The editor-in-chief of a newspaper or the news editor of a TV channel is not an insider. They only work according to certain guidelines that come from the supreme caste. Sometimes a little human goodwill or a little confusion can get news into the media that shouldn't be allowed. They then disappear. Of course, but you can see from this phenomenon that the system is not perfect. Social transformation to a more favorable state is not possible, because it would take an event on a large enough scale for the supreme caste to take notice and stop it. This world cannot be changed from the top down. Change can only start from the ground up and spread higher and higher. This is the chance. It is only an illusion that the power of a king is greater than that of the common person. A common person can be disobedient, and if they are not very spectacularly disobedient, no one cares. If they are spectacularly so, they may be disciplined. If a king is just a little disobedient, he'll be killed. Your situation is better than that of a president. Every move a president makes, every word they say, is watched with a wary eye. In contrast, the common person is looked down upon by the caste and treated as a nameless, faceless mass. In the eyes of the caste, you are just a small cog in the wheel. But you are not a small cog. If you change under the influence of this book, if you use its guidelines on authority, it is a change that the supreme caste cannot avoid or notice. An individual transformation is something that the supreme caste is not prepared for, and if enough people change, the whole world changes. The great game of the supreme caste is to stir up contradictions and keep people busy. The transformation of the world will be manifested in the fact that the contradictions will begin to diminish. If you do not believe the arguments of authority, if you insist on seeing things through your own eyes, if you do not accept the thousands upon thousands of conflicts on offer, the shackles will be removed from your mind. And once that happens, the lies, some of which I have invented over the last quarter century, lose their impact. In this book, I have given you principles, because I could give you nothing else. Principles to help you think and change your life. No matter how many facts I wrote down, no matter how many secrets I revealed, they would have made you feel even smaller, and the world would be even more powerful. But that was not my goal. Not anymore. The supreme caste itself, the entire system, lives off of your abilities. The people who hold the real power on this planet are parasites. They cannot survive without your help, and you help them to survive by believing their claims and accepting the conflicts they offer. If you stop doing these two things, you have defeated them. Seven. And finally, I wish you to know what it is like to live in the light. I wish for you to know what it is like to live in a world where lies, pain, and selfishness do not block out the sun. They are not necessary. They do not make life exciting. It is not the fragility of life that makes life beautiful, but the infinite possibilities that lie within it. When humanity is not threatened with violence from every direction, when we are not lied to about everything, when we are not confused at every turn, when we are not forced onto a hamster wheel that is in our natural state, in our natural environment, then we are not disgraceful worms who do not deserve to live. A human being, when mentally fit, is a noble and great being. Basically, everyone is, and evil is born of mental degradation. It is helpful for a human being to be at peace, to have more opportunities, to be more free. To defy the supreme caste is a very dangerous undertaking. Only I know. You can believe me. There is only one thing more dangerous: not to defy it. The supreme caste is strong, but only as long as you are weak. Then there is only one difference between strong and weak: awareness.